Dean Martin was midway through that some more when something in the front row caught his eye and froze the smile on his face. It wasn't pointed at him. Not yet. The gun sat casually on the table, half hidden by a linen napkin, like a reminder rather than a threat. The man behind it was the kind of name people in Las Vegas never said out loud. A name that didn't need an introduction. Dean stopped singing. The band, confused, kept playing for a few beats. The room went quiet in that dangerous, electric way where everyone knows something is wrong but no one dares to move. And then Dean Martin did the one thing no one expected. He stepped off the stage, walked straight toward the table, and held out the microphone. It was a move that would either cement his legend forever or end his life before the night was over. To understand why that moment mattered, you have to understand Las Vegas in 1965. This wasn't a sanitized, family-friendly playground. It would later become Vegas. Back then belonged to the mob. The hotels, the casinos, the showrooms, everything flowed through organized crime. The Sands Hotel wasn't just a glamorous destination. It was a business venture backed by men who solved problems with cement shoes and desert graves. Everyone who worked there understood the rules. You performed. You smiled. You took your money. And you never crossed the men who really owned the city. Dean Martin understood that world better than most. He grew up in Steubenville, Ohio, where bookmakers, fixers, and enforcers weren't movie characters. They were neighbors. His father worked in a barbershop that doubled as an illegal gambling hub. Dean learned early how power worked, how respect was earned, and how fear operated in silence. He knew the mob wasn't something you challenged head-on. You survived it by knowing when to look away. But Dean also had something that made him dangerous in his own way. On stage, he didn't fear anyone. Not studio heads. Not critics. Not gangsters. When Dean Martin stepped under the lights, he answered to no one. That confidence had protected him for decades, until the week it did in Singapore. Tie-dyes before that show. Dean was relaxing in his dressing room at the Sands, flipping through a magazine, when there was a knock at the door. His assistant, Jackie Homana, opened it and immediately went pale. Standing in the hallway was a sharply dressed man with dead eyes and a voice that never raised itself. "Mr. Martin," the man said calmly, "Mr. Antonelli would like to speak with you after your show tonight, in private." Dean didn't look up at first. He simply said, "Tell Mr. Antonelli I am usually exhausted after shows. Maybe another time." The man didn't flinch. "Mr. Antonelli insists." That was when Dean stood up. He walked to the doorway, met the man's stare, and spoke softly enough that only the two of them could hear. "Tell Mr. Antonelli that Dean Martin doesn't take meetings through messengers. If he wants to talk to me, he can come himself and ask like a gentleman." The hallway went silent. The man studied Dean for a long moment, then nodded once. "I'll deliver the message." When he was gone, Jackie looked like he might pass out. "Dean," he whispered, "do you know who that was?" "That was Vincent Antonelli's guy." "You can't brush him off like that." Vincent Antonelli wasn't just connected. He was feared. A reputation built on disappearances and quiet funerals. When Antonelli asked for your time, you gave it. No excuses. No delays. Jackie tried to explain that men like Antonelli didn't hear the word no. Dean shrugged, picked up his magazine, and said, "I don't work for him. I work for the Sands. And I'm the one filling seats." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Now it was show night. The Sands was packed. Celebrities, high rollers, men who carried themselves like kings because they knew the desert hid their sins. Dean was in full command of the room, leaning into the melody, smiling that lazy smile when he saw the gun. Not raised, not threatening, just present, a message delivered in metal. The man hadn't come backstage. He'd come to the front row. He wanted to be seen. Dean stopped singing. Every instinct in the room screamed danger. The band hesitated. The audience thought it was a bit. Dean didn't signal security. He didn't call Frank. He didn't back away. He stepped down from the stage and walked toward the table like he was strolling up to an old friend. When he reached the mobster, he placed the microphone in front of him and said, "You look like you've got something to say." The room forgot how to breathe. The mobster stared at Dean, then at the microphone, then back at the stage. For a long moment, no one moved. Finally, the man laughed. A low, gravelly laugh that broke the tension just enough to keep blood from spilling onto the carpet. He leaned back, pushed the gun away from view, and waved Dean off. Dean took the microphone back, nodded once, and returned to the stage as if nothing had happened. The band picked up the song. The audience erupted. They thought they'd witnessed courage. They didn't realize they'd just watched a man walk through a minefield without flinching. Later that night, the message came quietly. No threats, no shouting, just respect. Vincent Antonelli would never bother Dean Martin again, because Dean Martin hadn't challenged him with violence. He'd done something far more dangerous. He'd shown him he wasn't afraid. He had spent his entire life around hard men. Dean learned early that fear was blood in the water. The moment you showed it, you were done. So he never showed it. He didn't posture. He didn't threat. He simply carried on like nothing could touch him, because in his mind, it couldn't. That attitude had kept him alive long before Las Vegas ever knew his name. The following night, June 16th, Dean delivered his usual flawless performance. Same jokes, same essence, same lazy confidence. When the show ended and he returned to his dressing room, the knock came again. The same messenger stood in the doorway, face tight and unreadable. "Mr. Antonelli is downstairs. He'd like to speak with you." Now, Dean was loosening his bow tie, already half out of character. "Tell Mr. Antonelli I've already left for the night." The man blinked. "But Mr. Martin, you're standing right here." Dean smiled without warmth. "Am I? Could have sworn I walked out 10 minutes ago." The messenger's jaw clenched. "Mr. Martin, I don't think you understand." "No, pal," Dean cut in calmly. "I understand perfectly. I understand I just worked 2 hours straight. I understand I'm tired. And I understand I'm going to my room to have a drink and go to sleep. Now, you can either stand here arguing with me, or you can go tell your boss exactly what I said. Your choice." The messenger stared for a long second, then turned and left without another word. Jackie Romano was panicking. "Dean, you're pushing this too far. These guys done to play around. You need to call Frank. He knows how to handle them. Frank can smooth this out." Dean shook his head. "I'm not dragging Frank into this, and I'm not sitting down with some guy who thinks snapping his fingers makes me jump. I don't run for anybody." Jackie looked at him like he was watching a man walk toward a cliff. By June 17th, the mood inside the Sands had shifted. Dealers whispered. Waitresses avoided eye contact. Security staff spoke in hushed tones. Word was out that Vincent Antonelli was furious. Quiet warnings filtered back to Dean's team. "Make peace. Peace. Take the meeting. Say whatever he wants to hear." Dean ignored all of it. That afternoon, his manager, Herman Citron, finally came to the dressing room, desperation written all over his face. "Dean, please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "What does he want?" Dean asked. Herman hesitated. "I'm not sure, but I heard it's about a woman." "His girlfriend. She dances at the Tropicana. She's been talking about going to Hollywood. Vincent thinks you put the idea in her head." Dean laughed out loud. I've never met her. I don't even know what she looks like. Herman swallowed hard. It doesn't matter if it's true. He believes it. Just apologize. Tell him you'll stay away. Tell him whatever keeps this from blowing up. Dean's expression hardened. I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do. If he's got a problem, he can bring it to me himself. Not through goons and threats. Herman knew that tone. Once Dean locked in, there was no moving him. He left the room knowing this was heading somewhere ugly. June 18th, 1965. Dean arrived at the Sands just before 6 in the evening for his 9 o'clock show. The hotel felt wrong. Too quiet, too alert. Security hovered in places they normally didn't. People spoke in fragments and stopped when he walked by. At 8:30, Jackie burst into the dressing room, pale and shaking. Dean, you have to cancel tonight. Dean didn't look up. Why would I do that? Vincent Antonelli bought out the first 3 rows, him and 20 of his guys. They're sitting out there right now. Dean adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror, perfectly calm. So they bought tickets. That makes them paying customers. Jackie's voice cracked. They're not here for the show. They're here to make a point. Dean turned, met Jackie's eyes, and said evenly, then I guess I'd better give them something worth watching. At exactly 9 p.m., Dean Martin walked onto the stage of the Copa Room at the Sands Hotel. 2,800 people stood and applauded. Somewhere in the front rows, Danger waited, and Dean Martin smiled like he had nothing to lose. Dean listened without interrupting. His expression relaxed, almost bored, like a man hearing a story he already knew the ending to. He took a sip from his glass, then set it down carefully. I've never met your girl, he said evenly. Never spoke to her. Never put an idea in anyone's head about Hollywood. I don't recruit dreams, pal. I just sing songs. Antonelli studied him, searching for a crack, a tremor, anything that smelled like fear. He found none. Dean Martin wasn't posturing. He wasn't bluffing. He was simply stating a fact. That was what unsettled men like Antonelli the most. Fear could be controlled. Ego could be manipulated. But indifference was untouchable. You embarrass me out there, Antonelli said finally, not angry, almost curious. Dean shrugged. You were embarrassing yourself. I just gave you a microphone so we could clear the air like grown men. A long pause hung between them. The hum of the air conditioner filled the room. Somewhere down the hall, a showgirl laughed. Antonelli took a slow drink. Most guys would have wet themselves if I did what I did out there. Dean smiled faintly. Most guys don't belong on that stage. The mobster laughed again, this time softer. You got something most people don't, Martin. What's that? Dean asked. You don't need us, Antonelli said, and that scares the hell out of people like me. Dean leaned back against the table. Luke, Vincent, you don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you anything. I sing. You run. Whatever it is, you run. If your girl wants to chase a dream, that's between you and her. But don't bring it to my doorstep. I don't carry other people's baggage. Antonelli nodded slowly. He knew when a line had been drawn in permanent ink. After a moment, he set his empty glass down. You're all right, Dean? You didn't have to do what you did tonight? Dean met his eyes. Yeah, I did. Antonelli smirked, then turned toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. You ever need anything? Dean cut him off gently. I won't. Antonelli laughed under his breath and walked out. Jackie stood frozen in the hallway, staring after him like he just watched a miracle. He rushed into the room. Dean, do you have any idea what you just did? Dean picked up his jacket. Yeah, he said calmly. I finished my show. That night traveled through Las Vegas faster than any rumor ever had. Dealers, whispered it. Bartenders repeated it. Pit bosses leaned in close and lowered their voices. Dean Martin had stared down Vincent Antonelli, not with threats, not with muscle, but with confidence so absolute it left no room for violence. From that night on, something shifted. Dean was never bothered again. No more messengers. No more threats. No more power plays. The mob didn't own him, and they knew it. They could do business around him, but they couldn't bend him. And in Las Vegas, that kind of quiet authority was rarer than gold. Years later, a casino executive was asked why Dean Martin always seemed untouchable. He answered simply, because Dean Martin didn't need the town. The town needed Dean Martin, and that was the real power, not the gun. On the table, not the money, not the fear. The power to walk onto a stage, see death staring back at you from the front row, and smile. Dean Martin didn't survive that night because he was reckless. He survived because he understood something most men never do. When you stop being afraid to lose everything. Nobody can take anything from you. I don't even know who your girl is, Dean said calmly, as if they were discussing the weather. I know that now, Antonelli replied. Turns out she was talking about some other guy. Cass agent. Situations already been handled. Dean didn't ask what handled meant. He never did. Some details weren't worth carrying home with you. Antonelli took a slow drink, studying him. Thing is, I sent my guy to talk to you 3 times. You brushed him off every time. Made me look weak in front of my people. I can't have that. So you came to my show to scare me? Dean asked, his tone almost amused. Antonelli smiled. Something like that. And it didn't work. No, Antonelli admitted. It didn't. Hailin ba, shaking his head. Most men would have folded the second I made that gesture. Most men would have begged. You walked straight at me and handed me a microphone. That's either guts or stupidity. Dean smiled faintly. Usually it's both. Antonelli laughed, the tension finally breaking. He set his glass down and extended his hand. We're good, Dean. You didn't do anything wrong. I respect a man who doesn't bend. Dean shook his hand. Appreciate it, Vincent. Antonelli turned toward the door, then stopped. Next time, I send someone to talk to you. Maybe don't make him come 3 times. Dean, nada, deal. And just like that, it was over. Vincent Antonelli walked out of the dressing room alive. Dean Martin remained standing. The night that could have ended in blood ended in silence. But the echo of what happened traveled through Las Vegas faster than gunfire ever could. By morning, every casino, every showroom, every backroom knew the story. Dean Martin had stood up to Vincent Antonelli and lived. More than that, he'd earned his respect. Something changed after that night. Before, entertainers were assets replaceable, disposable. Smile, sing, cash the check. Don't ask questions. Dean shattered that unspoken rule. He proved that a performer who knew his worth could stare down even the most dangerous men in the city and not blink. Frank Sinatra called him the next day. Are you out of your mind? Frank demanded. Do you know what that guy could have done to you? He could have done a lot, Dean said, but he didn't. Why didn't you just meet with him? Dean paused. Because if I ran the first time he snapped his fingers, I'd be running forever. These guys respect strength. Frank, you show weakness. They own you. There was silence on the line. Then Frank laughed. You crazy bastard! You're either the bravest man I know or the dumbest. Probably both, Dean said. Over the years, the story grew. People added guns, fists, shouting. None of it was true. The truth was quieter and far more impressive. A man faced death with nothing but calm, humor, and self-respect, and death stepped aside. Dean and Antonelli crossed paths occasionally after that. A nod, a raised glass, nothing more. Antonelli even came to a few more shows. Front row, clapping loudest. When Antonelli was killed years later in a mob hit, Dean simply said, "Tough guy, fair guy." That was as close as Dean Martin ever came to eulogy. When asked about that night, Dean always shrugged it off. "Some guy was distracting me during my song," he'd say. "So I dealt with it." But the people who were there knew better. They saw a moment when real courage, not loud, not violent, not desperate, rewrote the rules of the room. That microphone Dean offered wasn't a joke. It was a line in the sand. You want control? Step up. Step up. Until then, this is my stage. Vincent Antonelli understood it, and he respected it. That's why Dean Martin wasn't just cool on stage. That night at the Sands proved he was cool when it counted, when fear would have been reasonable, when survival wasn't guaranteed. No gunfight, no heroics, just one man refusing to bow, and that is why, on June 18th, 1965, Dean Martin didn't just survive Las Vegas. He owned it.